Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Ministry and Business Launch Program, giving you the keys to launch a successful ministry or business. This week's focus is on a very important one. This week, we're talking about marketing. Not just regular marketing, not just communicating value to others to get them to buy a product or service. We're talking about marketing to attract participation. A lot of ministries and not-for-profits really struggle with this. They really struggle with creating marketing materials and figuring out the systems that need to be in place to attract participation. How do we, as a nonprofit, as a ministry organization, keep the funnel of volunteers growing and attracting people to our organization, to our ministry, not for the purpose of a point of sale, but for the purpose of participation? Well, we're going to cover that this week. Hi, my name is Sean Adams. I'm the Pragmatic Pastor, and I'm going to take us through our agenda and jump right into this week's lesson. First, we're going to discuss the key to marketing to attract participation. You hear that? You're going to get it right off the bat. Isn't that amazing? And then we're going to look at the 5 key questions that every organization needs to ask itself if it wants to continue to attract quality volunteers. We're going to flesh those questions out in a case study. We're going to discuss the 3 methods to gain participants. We're going to discuss the volunteer filter. I'm going to give you a good system for filtering your volunteers and moving them to the never-ending volunteers track. Okay, we're going to keep you flooded with volunteers with this never-ending volunteers track. I think you'll really get a lot of value out of that. And lastly, you're bringing in a bunch of volunteers, so how do we manage those volunteers? We're going to talk about volunteer management. My name is Sean Adams. I am a pastor and a product manager. I am extremely passionate about making dreams become reality. And how do we do that? I speak to visionaries, I speak to business leaders, I speak to people with great ideas, and I help them take those lofty ideas and turn them into pragmatic steps to launching a product, a business, something of that nature. Okay, I've been doing this for a number of years, and I've been very blessed to work with a number of great organizations, government agencies, not-for-profits, and some Fortune 500 companies. I've been very blessed, to say the least. What I like to do external to my day job of managing products is provide strategy and marketing insights for small businesses and non-profit organizations. Okay, I have a BS in psychology, an MBA from Liberty University of Virginia, one of the largest Christian universities in the world. I'm a product manager certified in the discipline of pragmatic marketing. And I'm also a pastor. I run my own small, church, a small not-for-profit organization. So I absolutely understand a lot of the problems that we have with keeping quality volunteers and making sure that funnel remains full as we not only serve those who come, but create opportunities for others to serve. Right? It's something near and dear to my heart. So I absolutely can understand what the people on the call this week are feeling, what they're going through, their level of anxiety or angst or the problems they're running into. And I really hope, I believe that this week's course is going to help take a lot of people to the next level. Let's jump right into it. This is a picture of a skeleton key. Now, a skeleton key, back in the day of warded locks, a skeleton key was a key that was stripped down to its most rudimentary elements. They called it a skeleton key because it was stripped down to the skeleton. It's stripped down, again, to its most rudimentary elements so that it can bypass all the wards of a warded lock and unlock a door. This statement that sits next to the skeleton key on our PowerPoint slide is the skeleton key to unlocking the funnel of volunteers that are just waiting to burst down your door. Let me tell you the formula here. Communicate the value created and invite others to create that value with you. I'm going to say it one more time. Communicate the value created and invite others to create that value with you. If you can do that, you won't move people to a point of sale. You will attract them to participate. And since participation is the desired action, it's what you're looking for out of people, you need to make sure that everything that's within your control creates a seamless environment where you can move people seamlessly through whatever processes you need to get them to the end where they can be hands for your vision, feet for your vision. You need to make it easy for volunteers to see themselves working for your organization. When you're communicating the value you create and you invite others to create that value with you, the people you're inviting need to be able to see themselves there doing the task at hand. The next thing we need to do is we need to vet our own organization. We need to take some hard looks at ourselves, some critical looks at ourselves, examine ourselves, and see if we're somewhere where we would even want to volunteer. Let's answer these 5 questions. I actually put them out on the slide. What value are you creating? Why do you create this value? Are you successfully creating this value? And here's what the volunteers are going to ask. Why should I help you create the value? And how can I help you create this value? Do you notice the type of questions they are? A what, 2 whys, an are, and a how? That's important. What value are you creating? What is it you're doing for others that's so attractive, that's so needed? Why are you doing it? Why are you creating this value? What need are you filling? Not what need are you filling, but why are you filling that need? Are you meeting the need? Are you successful? No volunteer wants to hook onto a train of people not headed in the right direction. Volunteers want to know they've hitched onto a winning team. They're going to ask themselves, why should I help you? I only get 1 volunteer day a year with my organization, and I must be careful where I use it. Why should I use my volunteer day with you? And then, if I do decide to use my volunteer day with you, how can I help create this value? This value that you've pitched to me, this value that you say you successfully created, the value that you told me you created because of whatever good reason exists. How can I help you how can I help you create this value? That's what a volunteer is going to ask. And if you can answer those 5 questions honestly, then you can begin the process of running your organization through a value filter. And once it makes it out the end of that value filter, you can attract participation, because you're attracting participation with the value you're creating and not just the need for a helping hand, which really doesn't get us far these days. You say, Sean, you're using the word value a lot, okay? And I don't understand why you're using the word value. Value is simply vision in the works. All that means is that volunteers need to see you winning. They need to see you accomplishing your goals. They need to see that when you say you're, supplying food or donating clothes or putting out jackets, they need to see that you're actually doing that. So value here simply means vision, the vision for your organization, the vision that your nonprofit and ministry exists. That vision is actually happening. Vision in the works equals value. So the purposes of our conversation, whenever you hear the word value, keep that nomenclature in mind, is that value equals vision in the works. Let's look at someone's vision in the works. We're going to flesh out those 5 questions in a case study. You have been provided with a case study document called FDCM, the case study. And it's basically talking about a not-for-profit that exists in eastern San Francisco Bay Area. So let's listen to the way that FDCM answers the 5 questions. Okay, what value are you creating? They say, we're feeding the less fortunate of the eastern San Francisco Bay Area. Why do you create this value? They talk about Eastern San Francisco Bay Area has the highest levels of poverty, lowest means to assistance. Okay, 4 of the communities they serve are in 100% government assistance. It's so on and so forth. And without FDCM, hundreds of children will not eat over the upcoming holidays. You see how they use holidays, or they use the term, weekend or something like that. That's to put a time frame. It's to let you know that this is a present, urgent need. Okay? And this could have been written at any time. It could have been written at any time. But make sure you put a time frame in your answer, because the value you create is immediate. So make sure you put a time frame that expresses the immediacy of the value you're creating. Are you successfully creating this value? FDCM says, sure. Since we began in 2013, we've fed 1,500 families, 7,500 individuals, and distributed 12 tons of food. Why should I, as a volunteer, help you create this value? As a volunteer, you help to feed underprivileged children. You help to feed underprivileged families right here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Use your location, especially if you're a ministry that works in the community. If you're a not-for-profit that works and serves in a community, use that community. The pool in your community is a great resource. Say it over. Make sure people know where you are and who you serve. Why should I help you create this value? Statistics show that nonprofit organizations, just like FDCM, come into an area and offer strategic assistance, help move people to self-sufficiency. And when that happens, crime rates drop, neighborhoods around the location we support get better, crimes decrease, children focus more on lessons and studies when they're well fed. Only your help can make all these things possible. Only your help can make all these things possible. You see how the needs expressed in a way that makes sure that every person can see themselves there. Let's look at the case study. Now, here's the thing. Answering the 5 questions is for you. It's an exercise for the nonprofit leadership. It's an exercise for the ministry leadership. What has to happen beyond that is you use the 5 questions to tell a story. Now, I'm going to tell you a story on the next slide. It's actually on the next page of your document. But let's look at this next slide. Meet Juanita. Juanita lives in uptown Oakland, where more than 40% of residents live below the poverty line. On Friday afternoon, immediate time frames, okay, Juanita has a name and a face. On Friday afternoon, Juanita leaves John Muir Elementary. John Muir Elementary is a famous school in the area, known for not being the highest quality school. Guess what? I'm using location information, okay? She will not have another meal until breakfast time on Monday morning, when she returns to school the following week. Juanita lives in what sociologists call a food desert. Meet Rebecca. Rebecca is an angel with Food Distribution Center Ministries, FDCM. Okay? See how we're only using acronyms in the story after we've introduced the entire term? Please, when you're creating your story, when you're creating your marketing materials, people don't know what your acronyms mean. Use the full term of the name or ministry at least once before using shortened terms. Okay? On this Friday, look, we're going to change the story. We're going to change Juanita's life. We're going to change the story of Juanita. On this Friday, Rebecca helps to distribute food from local food banks in the parking lot of, guess what? That same location, John Muir Elementary. Juanita is now going to receive enough food for herself and 4 other family members to eat over the weekend and into next week. Look at the pictures we're using. Look at Rebecca. Rebecca looks like the person you want to volunteer. Juanita is an adorable child. Okay? Since FDCM began in 2013, we've fed 1,500 families just like Juanita's. No longer is the answer to the 5 questions some strange statistic. We don't have to mention 7,500 individuals. We don't have to mention 12 tons of food, because we're looking at families. Juanita's family. 1,500 families just like Juanita's. But, you hear that? But, now, when you look at the story, I encourage you to really read over and kind of participate in reading over the FDCM case study. But is the only negative term. Yeah, we told a really sad story about a poverty line. We told a really sad story about Juanita not eating, but, B-U-T, is the negative term. Watch how I hit negative after negative. But we could never accomplish such an extraordinary task. Extraordinary. It's heavy. It's hard to do without the help of our angels. You see how I'm using the nomenclature of FDCM? People just like you. People who are willing to take a small part in making the San Francisco Bay Area, location, better. A better place to live for everyone. Are you ready to put on your angel wings? Look at that. A call to action. If you are sending out marketing material, if you're telling a story without a call to action, you're simply telling a story. And a story without a call to action is a fiction. A story without a call to action is entertainment. Stories should create calls of action. Are you ready to put on your angel wings? Angels, what we call our volunteers. I've explained the nomenclature now. Now you feel like you're part of the organization. Can help in primarily 3 ways. Okay? Food distribution, food donation, food packaging. We tell you the 3 ways that we need, not only that we need help, but we tell you how we want you to help. And we're giving you options, extremely clear, cut, clean options. 3 options. What are they? Distribution, donation, packaging. You can ignore the term food because food's repetitive. Donation, distribution, packaging. And guess what? I call them to do something, a very small something. Click next steps below to find out more. You put this on your website, people are going to be interested in becoming part of the story. They can see themselves as Rebecca. They may know a Juanita. They want to become part of a story that feeds 1,500 families just like Juanita's. They want to become part of a story that works right in the San Francisco Bay Area. They want to become part of a story that can do one of the 3 primary methods of becoming an angel. They want to be part of the story. Now you create this story, and guess what? You don't just put it on your website. Yeah, you have click next steps below, and that's great because it's going to be on your website, but you don't just put it on your website, because if you leave it on your website, you can only pull in people who go to your website, and no one goes to your website but your mom. That's it. The only person who wants to go to your website is your mom. No one wants to go to your website. There are a million websites out there, hundreds of millions. Why should I go to your website? Who cares? So, and I'm sure that in our ministry and business launch program, we have other sessions, other modules to discuss marketing and getting people to come to your website. And we'll leave that to the experts. But for right now, I don't want you to simply leave this wonderful story on a web page, on a website. Put this story in the hands of an evangelist. Put this story in the hands of a champion. We're going to talk about the 3 methods to gain participation. And guess what? The first method is a champion and an evangelist. These are your most effective means of gaining participants. Putting your story, that story that we just created by answering the 5 questions, in the hands of a champion or evangelist. Someone who has personal influence opportunities. That's what champion and evangelists are. They're going to run out there and they're going to make your brand known. They're going to make your brand known. They're going to champion for you in their organization. They're going to champion for you in their church. They're going to sit on other boards and make mention of your name. You want a champion and an evangelist, and you all want them to tell the same story. You want everyone in your organization to tell the same story. Everyone in your organization needs to be able to say a story about Juanita, a story about Rebecca. They all need to be able to tell the same story. Even huge not-for-profits need to be able to tell the same story. There's power in story, especially stories that bring a call to action. You want your champions and evangelists armed with a story to tell. Because they're brand evangelists. They're going to push your brand to the next level. How else do you want to gain participants? Use the people you helped. The people you create value for can become great volunteers. There already are great volunteers. You just haven't tapped into them yet. In the example of FDCM, Juanita's family, who receives groceries on Friday, should be given the opportunity to stand behind the other end of the table and hand groceries out to her peers. It creates a great feeling, and it teaches the person who receives to give back. How are you utilizing the people at the end of your supply chain? I know as a product manager, I have to consistently stay in contact with our users. I want to make sure that anyone who's using my software is providing me feedback, valuable feedback, so that I can move the product forward. So even if you're just reaching out to the people who use you for help to find out how you can make the process more seamless for them, you're gaining value from them. Always try to gain value from the people who use your services, the people who you create value for. And guess what? Part of that means that they can help you. They can become participants in the process that they're taking advantage of. The last thing you want to do to create, to gain participants is you want to use mass appeal. Now, mass appeal can be very ineffective if not done properly. If you decide to make a huge ask for help, okay, we're talking about gaining participants now. Asking for help is like this picture of this dog begging. You see this dog begging? It's a cute little doggy walker. Yeah. Well, that's exactly how you look, pastor. That's exactly how you look, friend. When you're asking everyone in your congregation to help in the children's ministry. Okay? There's a time and a place for asking for help. But you know what you really want to do? You want to be like this army commander over here. You want to be enlisting help. There's a difference. Let me break these down for you. First off, asking for help is absolutely okay for short-term goals, okay, for expressing positions of transparency. If you want to say, you know what, we really need help in area A, B, C, and you're just asking for bodies, and you're saying we really need this help, and this short-term goal is associated with this need, that's okay. Short-term goal, expressing a position of transparency, absolutely okay to ask for help, to stand behind a pulpit, a podium, a website, however you want to do it, and ask for help. It is not good for gaining great volunteer leaders. It's not effective. Asking for help, being this little cute doggy here, is not going to get you a lot of volunteer leaders. These guys over here who are in the list picture. You get two different types of people who respond. And I don't think of those two types of people. We're not going to get into the two types of people today, but of those two types of people, none of them are great volunteer leaders typically. Another thing you need to watch out for when you're asking for help is that when you ask for help and you ask for extra bodies to come into those environments, you need to make sure that there's a great volunteer leader in that environment. That place needs to be organized. We'll talk about how to manage your volunteers in later slides and as we get further into the conversation, but I need to make mention now that if you don't have a great volunteer leader in the environment in which you're asking for help, what you're really asking for is trouble. Because you bring a bunch of disorganized bodies in there with no direction, and you've created a hurricane from a tornado. You've taken a summer storm and turned it into a hurricane or a tornado, and that's bad. So what do we really want to do when we gain participants with mass appeal is we want to enlist help. Here's how you enlist help. A person who enlists help says, I want to bring somebody in who will become the new me. Enlisting help is the effort of duplication. Let me tell you how to do this. Pastor Ruben's our worship leader here at Epiphany Covenant Church. Pastor Ruben brings in John. He sees John coming to church. He says, hey, John, I know you play the piano. Why don't you come on and watch me lead worship one Sunday? John hangs out, watch Pastor Ruben lead worship from behind the scenes, and he says, "Hey man, why don't you come do it with me?" Pastor Ruben invites John to play the piano while Pastor Ruben actually plays the guitar. So Pastor Ruben will play the guitar, and John will be up there playing the piano, and they'll lead worship together. And then Pastor Ruben says, "You know what? Now you do it. I want you, John, to lead worship." And John, while nervous, may be happy to do so. He'll lead worship by himself, and he does it well. Enlisting help looks like that. Watch me do this. Let's do it together. Now you do it. A couple of things you can't have when you enlist help is fear. Fear is not allowed into the equation. You see these Army guys over here? They're training other militaries so that they can be ready to defend their country when the U.S. military leaves. There isn't a lot of room for fear in this organization. There isn't a lot of fear room left when there's enlisting. Another thing you need to do is to make sure you identify the win and celebrate the duplication of the role as well as the addition of the body. As a ministry leader, your job then is to tell Ruben, you did a great job, man. You did excellent. High five, pats on the back, maybe even get a raise. Because you did what you were supposed to do. You duplicated. You weren't afraid of giving up your position. Now you get to go on to a higher position because you duplicated. Every organization I work for, one of the first things I do when I enter an organization is I find out who my key stakeholders are, especially in relation to feeding me information. In product management, product manager is fed information from so many different sources, and I am actually a core-facing, technology-facing product manager, so I really work really kind of in the soup and nuts of technology and in software. So I work with a lot of development managers. Well, after I identify my key development managers, I say, "Okay, Mr. Development Manager, where is your second? Where is the person you're mentoring? Where is the person that when you're gone, I can go to and get the same answer I would have gotten from you?" And if the answer is, I don't have one, then my comment to them is, train one. I can't have one monkey stopping an entire circus. I like the way the old folks say, "Don't know one monkey stop no show." I'm not sure if they say it like that. But you get the picture. You don't ever want one person to stop the entire show. And so especially when dealing with volunteers aren't always paid. They don't have to show up that day. You want to make sure that someone has duplicated themselves along the way. That's enlisting help. And it works much better than asking for help. And both of those are under the premise of mass appeal. Because you have a mass of people who help you and a mass of people asking for help from others. Okay? So now you're gaining participants. You have champions who are armed with great stories. You're using people at the end of your supply line. You're absolutely using mass appeal, but you're doing it properly. You're not just asking for help without great leaders in those environments. You're not just asking for help without expressing a short-term goal of transparency. You're enlisting help, and you're using the duplication factor of great servant leaders. And now that you're doing that, you have a huge inflow of leaders. And guess what you need? A filter. This is my little filter. This is actually an oil filter. I like oil filters. Now, dirty oil flows into the filter. Okay, it moves through the filter disc and the filters, and then gravity kind of diffuses it and pulls out clean oil. Flows right on out of it. Okay, there are two types of oil filters. There's bypass and there's full flow. Now, most of you who have a car have a full flow oil filter, right? It's the most common. Oil gets filtered before it gets to the engine. All the oil gets filtered before it gets to the engine. But a full flow oil filter actually has a bypass system integrated into it. And what that means is if the full flow filter gets really clogged up, the bypass will switch. And the oil will be able to bypass the filter and flow into the engine. Why is that? because dirty oil is better than no oil at all. Diesel is a bigger engine, so it has 2 filters and a bypass. What am I telling you? You need to have a filter. And the bigger your organization, the more volunteers you're trying to intake, the more layer of filter you need. You may need 2 filters. You may need 1 filter. Diesel has 2 filters. You may need a filter and a bypass. You may need to find, this is what I mean by the bypass. You may need to find where volunteers can go without training, where volunteers can go without issue, where you can put green people who just want to volunteer, who don't really have any idea what they want to do. They just want to get their hands busy, where you have some great environment where you can put them through and they can work with great volunteer leaders there. This is the environment of where you ask for help for a short-term goal and you have a great volunteer leader there and you put them in that environment and they're managed well and they're looking to participate further. Okay? So it's okay to have a bypass environment, a place where you shoot volunteers over who are green, who don't know your values, don't know your organization, but want to get their hands dirty. There's okay to have a bypass. But by and large, you need to filter. You see, dirty oil is better than no oil at all. That's what the bypass is for. But you want clean oil, okay? You want a full flow filter. So here's our full flow filter for our volunteers. G squared T C squared. G squared T C squared. What do our 2 G's mean? Gifts and goals. What are these volunteers gifted to do well? What types of gifts do they want to contribute to the cause? What are their unique goals when volunteering? Are they just there to satisfy community service hours? Are they doing it because they have one volunteer day? Talents, calling. What has God called them to do? Career. What do they do for a living? Are they happy doing it? The filter is extremely important, but it's also extremely powerful. Not only are you getting clean oil into your engine, not only are you making sure that your volunteers, this massive participants you've pulled in, not only are you making sure that they're going to the best place possible, the greatest environments where they can use their gifts and talents well, but because they get to use their gifts and talents, they want to stay there. They want to stay there more. They want to be there longer. Maybe God has called them to do it, so they need to get their hands wet in that particular form of ministry before they go on and launch out into their own, next steps. What do they do for a living career-wise? Can they become a champion for you in an organization? Can they become an evangelist for you at some for-profit company that really wants to get known in the community for being a helping hand? Do they hate what they do and they're looking for a life change and they're volunteering to find out if they really love this? They're interning in your marketing department to see if they want to go into marketing in the first place. This filter is so very important. A full flow filter. That's the kind of filter you want. G squared T C squared. All right? And once you have that filter in place, then you can move this huge mass of volunteers into a track that's going to cause them to create after their own self, that's going to cause you to have a never-ending funnel of volunteers. Hook, filter, hook, track. Very simple. Hook, filter, hook, track. Look at this picture. This is a picture of a hook on a track. Very simple little concept. You hook your scarf or your tools and you can slide it on down the track and slide it back, put it where it needs to be and put it back. That's exactly the way you want to do your volunteers. You want to hook them with something. You want to run your filter on them. You want to put them on the track that they requested. Then you want to hook them with a hook of ownership. And then you want to put them on a different track, a track of ownership. So let me break that down for you. Using our case study, using FDCM, I'm going to give you an example of an angel, one of the angels for food packaging. We'll call her Betty, for Betty's sake. Betty comes in and says, I want to work with FDCM and package food for you guys. So she decides to become an angel in the food packaging area. We put the filter on her, right? You say, hey, what do you love to do? Betty loves to delegate. Betty happens to drive past FDCM daily. Betty works with her company's charitable contributions committee. And all this you found out because Betty was filtered. It isn't necessarily an application process where you put them through this long piece of paper. It can be through the course of them volunteering and you getting to know them. You can apply this filter to people as you get to know them. That's why it's in a G squared T C squared. That's why it's simple. It's simple and easy to remember. You can find out this information from them in literally one conversation. So the first hook is that they want to come in and volunteer anyway because they were one of those participants that were gained through one of your 3 great methods, okay? They come in, they love your story, they come in, and they're hooked on wanting to package food. You run the filter on her, and then you put her on the first track. What's the first track? Packaging the food. I don't understand why when someone comes in to a church or a ministry or a not-for-profit and they say, you know what, I'm really good at sound. I have a really good ear for sound, and I worked in a studio for a secular company, and after I became a Christian, I didn't want to work in the studio anymore, but I'm still really good at it. I would love to do it, but I just can't do it secular anymore. And they say, the pastor says, great, this way to the children's church. That's unacceptable. The very first track that any volunteer should be on is the track they requested. If Betty came as an angel for food packaging, the very first thing she needs to do is package food at the distribution prep center. That's your first track. Then you introduce a second hook, and you can introduce a second track. What's the second hook? Ownership. Hey, Betty, man, we really appreciate you being here to package food, and you really helping out all the Juanitas of the world. Use your story. We have a great need for getting a lot more bags. You've already examined her through the filter. She's enjoying the track she's on, right? She's expressed desire to help more because you got that through the filter. She's not just there for community service. She's, because she got, drunk or something and had a DUI. She's there because she works with her company's charitable contributions committee, and she wanted to use her volunteer day for something that seemed familiar. She drives past you every day. The track she's on now is that you need to put her on now is one of an evangelist and an owner. And her job in this evangelist and owner role is to gather packaging materials. So she says, yeah, I work for my charitable contributions committee. I love to delegate. So I'm going to send out an email to all my peers and coworkers, all 40,000 of them, and I'm going to set up bag drop-off stations where they can drop off their gently used plastic bags. I'll gather them up weekly, and I'll bring them to you. She doesn't have to count the bags. You count the bags. Because part of this track is reinforcing her commitment to stay on the track by providing feedback on progress and the value she's creating in her new role. Yes, she created value by packaging food at the distribution prep center, but now that she's on a ownership track, an evangelist track, she's creating a greater amount of value, which means you need to communicate that properly. Hey, Betty, thank you so much for what you're doing at your company. You've brought in 3,000 bags this week. 3,000 bags in 1 week. We were able to send out, if every bag holds, 10, 15 pounds of food, we were able to send out 15 times 3,000. That's a big number, whatever that is. 30, 45,000 pounds of food. Just because of what you did. You reinforced that commitment by keeping track of what value she's creating and provide that feedback to her. Give her the progress. What value is she creating in that role? That's how you create never-ending volunteers. Hook, filter, track, hook, track. Very simple, very easy. Use your notes. You'll have never-ending volunteers. How do we manage those volunteers, though? Happy volunteers do what they planned to do before they signed up. Remember the first track? If she wants to pack bags, she needs to be packing bags. If a young lady comes in and says, I really want to work with you, I have an ear for sound, I'm good at studio work, and then you put her in children's ministry, you failed. You failed. Volunteers want to be told what to do versus finding something to do. No volunteer should come and have to twiddle their thumbs. They should be able to immediately get their hands dirty with guidance. They want to feel good about what they do. They want to know they've hitched onto a winning team. They want to be able to clearly display the why of the fact of the help that they did. You see this woman hugging this child at the Red Cross? She feels good about what she did. If you can clearly display, clearly dot the line from the environment that they're volunteering to the why of the win, then you've done good. What does that mean? That as Sally comes and works in the sound room, that we're sending off this sermon or this message series to a little village in Mexico where we've seen 1,000 people come to Christ because ours is the only Christian program on the radio station. We need to be able to connect the why of the environment to the win. And when you're able to do that, volunteers feel good about what they do. If you're not able to do that, you need to re-examine, ask those 5 questions simply on that environment. Why is this environment in existence if it's not creating a win? Volunteers, in order to be happy, need to be owners. Volunteers need to be able to easily find themselves participating. They need to be easily able to participate. Remember that filter? That filter doesn't have to be some long application process. Also remember, we have the bypass, if necessary, to drop them in an environment that's well controlled, that's well ran, and use them there. Now, another key element to volunteer management is line of sight. Ben Franklin said, "Hide not your talents. They for use were made. What's a sundial in the shade?" In typical Ben Franklin wit, he really points out a key concern for volunteer management: the line of sight. There are 2 ways you can do volunteer management. There's one that's out of sight and one that's in sight. Out of sight management is like this picture here of this volunteer teaching children English in Ubud, Bali. Now, Ubud, Bali really does need children to learn English, and this volunteer is doing a great thing. But that's out of sight of the community in which you're trying to create pool. What's in the line of sight is what's happening at this picture where the Greene County High School students help volunteers rake 125 yards in Jefferson, Scranton, and Grand Junction in Iowa for their annual project of Monday afternoon service day. This is in sight and this is out of sight. Ubud, Bali, out of sight. Greene County, in sight. When you have a volunteer force, you can let your volunteer force go to the most impoverished area of your state and do volunteer work. The most impoverished area here in Colorado is Otero, Colorado. Otero, Colorado is a very small community and kind of a farming type town, and it's extremely below the poverty line. Not a lot of educated people there. Everyone's on assistance almost. It's just a very, very small town that's extremely impoverished. In Alabama, Sumter County is the most impoverished area, impoverished county in Alabama. You can send your volunteers there to do work, and they'll do a great work, and it'll be for a great cause. But that's out of sight volunteerism. In sight volunteerism is doing it in I guess in Colorado would be Highlands Ranch. It's a very kind of affluent side of town, but you send the kids out there to rake yards with the t-shirts on that say, Epiphany Covenant Church, and you're doing it in that community so that the people in that community can say, hey, they're busy for our community. We should go to that church. We should donate to that community. We should support that volunteer program. We should do something to support those who are supporting us, even if it's raking our leaves. Look at the houses in this picture in Greene County. These are nice houses. These are very nice houses. This is not Ubud Bali, okay? This is insight. And the reason you want to manage your volunteers to make sure that there is insight volunteerism is so that the communities in which you need to create to pull resources from can see that active hand in their community, and they're more likely to donate. This is volunteer management kind of 201. This isn't just keeping the volunteers happy or, on-site safety, in which we'll talk about next. This is how to use a system of volunteerism to make sure that you're bringing in resources with your volunteerism and not just expending them like you do in Ubud Bali. Now, let's talk about that on-site management, because that's very important. And it's our last slide, so you'll be free to go and kind of digest all this information and hopefully put it in use and leave comments and questions below. One of the things you want to make sure you do on site is take a lot of pictures. A lot of pictures. Now, you have some rules to follow when you take pictures. Here are the 3 rules. Protect the dignity of those you serve. Provide picture-taking opportunities so the workers can focus on working and they don't have to worry about taking selfies while they're handing out food. Lastly, you want to allow the volunteers to be branded. You want to make sure they're able to display their branding. You want to make sure you cooperate with branding from the sponsoring organizations. The more and more organizations you work with, the more and more they're going to want to make sure their name is plastered everywhere. And being understanding of that need will make you a more likely resource to have people repeat volunteerism, especially from a corporate level. When the corporation is able to come out there with all their t-shirts on that say, ABC Corporation Volunteer Day, you want to make sure you take pictures of those people with ABC Corporation Volunteer Day on their shirts. Creating an environment on site that helps to create memories brings in more volunteers for you later on in the process. You want to make sure that the on-site experience is extremely organized. You're looking for excellence. Excellence. You want to carry volunteers through an application process if necessary, but you want to make sure it's extremely light, especially depending on what their needs are. Let me give you a real-life example very quickly. I am on the Charitable Contributions Committee at my job, at my employer. I bring up ministries and not-for-profit organizations which the company can present to their employees as opportunities to volunteer. I called one particular not-for-profit. They had an extremely thorough application process, which is very good for what they were doing. But it was extremely tenuous. And they had no bypass. They had no way to let volunteers come in and go to a well-controlled environment and simply use their time there and feel like they're contributing to the vision of the organization. They had no bypass. And because they couldn't carry their volunteers through an application process that was seamless and easy, with a bypass, they lost an opportunity for us to volunteer. Instead, we picked another organization, and we volunteered there so many times during the year. So many people would go back over and over. They only get one volunteer day, and they wanted to go back over and over and over again. They were using their own PTO days to go back and volunteer with their friends and their family and their cohorts. Because the process was seamless. Because the on-site experience was great. Because they felt good there. You want to make sure you gather some contact information so that you can submit newsletters and email blasts out. If volunteers only show up on site, you want to make sure you create time where they're comfortable to provide that. You want to keep your volunteers safe. Notify the volunteers concerning any children and age limits. You want to make sure you have an emergency exit plan. If you're going to have volunteers at a kind of crime-infested area, you want to make sure that the volunteers' vehicles are watched, that they're secure. You want to make sure that emergency exit plan's in place, because the minute someone fires a gun, people are going to get scared and they need to know what to do in that situation. The last two things around volunteer management is you need to express God's love in everything you do. And don't discriminate against volunteers. You have an application process. You have a filter for a reason. And because you have a filter, you have a bypass where you can put people into a very controlled environment where they can contribute to pushing your vision forward, regardless of whether they live a perfect life or not. That's what your filter's for. And it helps you to not discriminate against volunteers. Instead, you put them in the best area for them using your filter, using your bypass. Recapping what we talked about today, we were able to provide you a skeleton key. What's the skeleton key? Communicate the value created and invite others to create that value with you. If you do that, you have the key to unlocking unlimited numbers of volunteers. But you need to ask yourself 5 questions. You need to vet your organization with the 5 questions we presented. Don't worry about the word value. Value in our presentation was simply related to the fact that your vision is in the works. We gave you a case study to flesh out the answers to the 5 questions, as well as create a story behind your organization with those answers from the 5 questions. You put the story in the hands of your champions and your evangelists. You make sure you use the people who are at the end of your supply chain. And if you use mass appeal, you use it well. You don't just ask for help, you enlist help. You put them through the filter. G squared, TC squared. Put them through the filter. And after they've gone through the filter, you have this mass of volunteers who have either bypassed and are in a safe environment, or you've put them in a filter and you've hooked them, you filtered them, you put them on a great track that they asked for, and then you hook them with ownership and you put them on a track of ownership. And now you have a never-ending supply of volunteers who are self-duplicating. And then you manage your volunteers well. You manage their line of sight. You keep them safe when they're on site. You keep them happy. You can do this. You can market to attract participation. And when you do, you'll have great success, and I want you to tell us all about it. Thank you and have a great night.